us, Pastor Tony Froese.
Yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure. The pleasure is all mine.
Honor.
And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. You know, not very many folks at the tender age of, 32?
Yes.
Happens to be a senior pastor. And, you have a really interesting, I think, story. I've heard bits of it in church that you've told about just your path and your journey to where you are right now.
Sure.
But we're going to touch on that in a little bit. I want to get to sort of maybe hear a little bit more about you as Pastor Tony, but more as Tony Froese, right? And then we'll dive into how you came to be where you're at today. So what do you do for fun? Like, what do you do outside of when you're not churching?
Fun. It's I definitely, that was asked not that long ago. Someone had said, what do you do as a hobby?
Yeah.
It was kind of embarrassing because I started seeking through, like, when you think of hobby, you think of, like, I don't know, collecting bottle caps or
stamps.
Yeah, something like that, or archery or something. But I'm really maybe a geek at heart because I like reading and then just honing my craft. It's almost like that's, to work my craft is one thing, but then to go learn about it is energizing and fun for me. But outside of that, I think just my family, that any spare moments that I have, children are young, 10 and 8, or 11 and 8 now.
Okay.
So every moment is so precious in time.
Yeah.
So really, it's whatever they're into. My son's recently just picked up hockey.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
fun.
Yeah, so Saturday mornings I go with him, and my daughter is, she's a math whiz and is doing art and stuff like that. So yeah, whatever their hobbies and interests are my hobbies and interests. Just a place to connect with them,
I can totally relate because when our boys were younger, it was the same thing. So our friends were all the parents who were either in music for young children or the various sporting activities. So that was our life, and we looked forward to all those events. So I absolutely understand that. Love the part about reading because I remember when I was a young girl myself, my youngest brother and I would compete as to which one of us would read the most books in a month.
Sure.
So a little geeky there too. So I can relate to
and that only happened for me later on in life. Like as a kid, I just wasn't a studious type of person.
Yeah.
But then I started to see the rewards of it, in my mid-20s, and then it was just like you almost became addicted to it. Like, hey man, if I can get some information and grow, it's just, man, it's addictive.
It does become almost like an addiction because I've spoken with quite a few folks across the many paths that I travel, and there's a resounding sort of theme, like it just keeps recurring. It's a recurring theme of I kind of didn't take my early years in elementary school, high school that serious, and then once I settled down, it was just this hunger. It's like you want more, right? So tell me, how do you use that hunger? I know your spare moments right now is really looking at the family and caring for the family, nurturing and spending those waking moments with the family. You also do a lot of other things. So tell me about that hunger and how it applies to other things.
Yeah, well, hunger for leadership is a big one. I think those principles, like the hunger for leadership, work in every area of your life, whether you're in family, you're in work. I think everyone's a leader.
Yeah, I do too.
So everyone has influence. Everyone is leading something, whether they know it or not. And so the hunger to be a better leader is just, it's almost like it never goes away. So I use that hunger to my advantage for being a better father, for being a better pastor, a better husband. And I always think that, we develop physically so and so far, and then our souls are just meant to keep growing. So definitely use that hunger to never come to a place where you're totally satisfied with where you're at, but always, keep that hunger in whatever it is. So if someone's telling me about their craft or whatever they're into or their path of life, learn as much as you can from that individual. I think armed with enough humility, you can learn something from anybody.
That is so powerful.
So never stop learning, never stop growing. And I think there's joy in that.
That is incredible.
So, I use it in a lot of areas.
That it reminds me of one of my brothers he's a teacher and still works as a teacher. And he never sat us down. He's an older brother. He never sat us down and say, it's a good thing for you to read, do your schoolwork, etc. No, he just modeled the behavior.
Yes.
And I found that I copied him.
Yeah.
And so that whole reading piece and so on, I realized that it came from him. So tell me a little bit about some of the folks in your own life as a young man growing up.
That's important. I always think, like, you know, obviously everyone's a product of a little bit of their environment and influences. And I look back over my life and there's thumbprints of each person that comes in and out. And so early on, it was obviously mom and dad. I think no one's an influence as much as the home, right? Because you spend so many hours there. So mom and dad were huge in development and growth as a child and into my teenage years. And we moved around a lot. So, you know, peer influence wasn't maybe as much of a majority in my life as it is for the average person. So really, you know, depended upon mom and dad to be that influence. And then as I, you know, aged into early adulthood, it just seemed like, you know, Providence would have it that the right people came into my life. And so early on, I had a gentleman, Mark Grisham, who's now my, you know, my mentor, my pastor that kind of oversees and walks things through with me. He kind of came into my life around the age of 20, I want to say 25 or something like that.
Pivotal.
So, and just saw something that was not developed yet, and was just an instrumental part in developing that influence. So that's probably, outside of my parents, that's probably the other major influencer. And then of course there's just name upon name upon name that has come since then and just taught me a piece of truth, or you see something. I think what's just been discovering for me lately is we tend to think if someone's successful in one area of their life, they're successful holistically. Yeah. And that's not the case, you know, so.
Not at all.
Yeah, so we all have these areas to shore up on, but, you know, so there's certain people that when it comes to modeling a marriage, they come to my mind. And there's certain people when it comes to parenting, I'm like, I like that. And, or pastoring, or being a leader, or just being dynamic speaker. You go, that's the one thing I'm going to glean from them. Wonderful. And then some things, you know, you just keep the rest. But you want that piece.
You want that piece, absolutely. And that's very powerful what you've said, simply because when someone hears that, say you're a pastor, the average person might tend to think perfection in all areas. So I'm just really pleased to hear you mention that, you know, I might be excellent at being a pastor, but there are other areas where I have to work at. And so I think it's critical for everyone to know these things and to know that as humans, we are far from being perfect, right? So you might be an amazing hockey player or whatever it is, but there are areas of your life.
And being aware of those areas is half of the battle. You know, if you can be humble enough to say, I need to work on this area, or I'm weak here. And weakness is not necessarily a bad thing. My wife has a saying. She says, your strength is usually your weakness. Absolutely. So if you're very outgoing, it's a pro and a con in certain environments. Yes. But just to be aware, I think to be self-aware is a big principle. To know when you enter the room, what are you offering? What do people get when they get you? You know, I like that. To be really aware of that. Has been beneficial especially in the last several years, because life has put me in a lot of different environments, and to remind myself, what do I bring to the table? Am I bringing something? And if I am, what am I bringing? Powerful. Yeah.
So the tendency, and I remember many years ago, both my husband and I, we actually left the church. And the reason that we gave was that church wasn't giving me anything. Right. And we didn't know at the time that we were the church. We are the church, right? And so it is what we bring to so that's so powerful to hear you say that. You know, it just reminded me of that time. And of course, as you grow and mature, you realize, what do I bring to the table when I show up? You know, when people see me. Tell me a little bit about the moving around. You mentioned that as a young child, you moved around a lot. What does that mean?
Well, I think we calculated it just from house to house. By the time I was 20, 21, I think it was over 25 times that we moved. So that's a lot. That's
that
like
is a lot,
an average
yes.
of less or more than once a year. So that, at first, it's easy to view things as a disadvantage, and I viewed that for quite a while as being a disadvantage. But I realized how it positioned me to do what I do now. It really, roots and development. As soon as you put roots in one area, we were rooted in another area. Some of it was unrest. Just my parents were a little bit full of unrest and looking for that next opportunity. Looking back now, my dad was just a dreamer, and he still is. And my mom and dad are both very, just live outside the box. And Dad was almost like a gypsy at heart, looking for the next thing that's going to be the biggest breakthrough. And so that it really caused me to find where I have to put roots. It's not a geographical location. Maybe it's not in peers. So I had to figure it out almost between, as a strong believer, it was God, that I had to put those roots down and to realize that my siblings were always going to be there. My parents were always going to be there, and God was always going to be there. And then, weirdly enough, I'm always going to be there. I'm always going to put up with me.
Absolutely.
So then, creating those roots and realizing that so it caused, as I got older, I realized it caused this very independent, which was something I had to work on. Right. But it was also an advantage to certain situations and assignments where you really felt sufficient. You just needed God behind you, and you needed a dream, and you needed some
and that's
tenacity.
a constant, right?
Yeah, that was the constant in my life, was I had those things. So Dad planted churches.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was that. He was a church planter, and looking back now, more of what we call an apostle. So it's someone that loves to start things. Not maybe a maintainer, but a builder. And he was one of those people that was very influential and still is. And he's very dynamic. People, when he talks, they want to hear him. So, would be quick. He was just really loud about his faith, really passionate about what he had experienced. And as he talked to people about that, a church would form.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was never really his intention. It just happened.
So why don't we pick up from where you were telling me about your dad?
Yeah.
Almost being like an apostle, planting churches, then all this moving around.
So then these churches, he'd start them, and then they'd get going, and then he'd kind of look for someone to shepherd them, to maintain them, and then we'd go on to the next work. So it allowed me to have a broad influence of people groups.
I can see that.
We were doing work in Central America. We did work in Western Canada. So it gave me a good exposure to different, backgrounds and people and cultures. And again, that knowing now, it played to my advantage. And the Lord was like preparing this certain personality that he needed to accomplish a certain task. I believe very much that, in divine order, that things happen for a reason. Yes. And then the alternative to not believing that is that things happen by accident, which I find like sucks purpose of a life.
Why go on?
Yeah, why go on if everything's just...
Yeah.
So you gotta pick which position you're going to stick with. And I think that, everything happens for a reason. Yeah. So my growing up years got this very eclectic, view of the church, because we worked in so many different denominations and church groups. So
cultures too, right?
Cultures. It gave you Christianity from this eagle's eye perspective. You got to see the broadness and the eclectic nature of the body of Christ. So that played to my advantage.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. So, that is very powerful. And when I heard you mentioned about having moved around quite a bit as a young child growing up, one thought that came to mind was army brats. So are you familiar with that term?
The term is an army kid? Or?
Right, army kid.
Yeah,
so they call them army brats because, again, they move a lot. Sometimes province to province, country to country, but just a lot of moving around.
Sure.
And consequently, they kind of create a certain personality that ended up having them being dubbed army brats, army kids, right? And so oftentimes there's some quantum moment that seems to come either out of that or because of that or so. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, an event, a situation, something that might have happened that made you realize that either the preparation, because at the time I'm thinking you weren't thinking you were being prepared.
No, not at all.
No, right?
Yeah.
But that thing happened, and you looked back and you said, "Whoa,
Yeah.
You know, is there such a moment?
Yeah,
for
there
you?
is. I would say that, you know, I worked with Dad for years, and then there was a time where I felt very strongly that I needed to plant a church and to go out. I felt this calling, if you will, and so we went and did that. And in the process of that, there's a dual nature, or, you know, event that happened at one time, and, you know, realizing in the same moment that, okay, I'm really self-sufficient, and that, you know, that's all been prepared up until this moment. And so being aware of that, and in that same moment realizing the negative spins of that, and how I needed to take that quantum shift and depend upon people, that no man's an island, and how, you know, it's very fun to be successful and to get to the top of the mountain or whatever achievement you have, but it's much more fun to get there with people. Yeah, when you're alone up there and you're just you're celebrating, you're like, hey, I did it, and you're like, whoa, where did all the people
around
go?
You.
That's not as fun. So again, probably my mid-20s was where we had some early, what we would measure success in ministry, and then the church started growing that we planted and started to gain, you know, some recognition and status and so on and so forth, and reached our community. You know, accelerated growth for the size of community we were in, and then just accelerated growth with ministry outside of the church and traveling and stuff like that. And it was in that process realizing, okay, I was made to not need the approval of people because of moving around, that worked to my advantage, but also it's caused me to maybe unplug socially, and how I could be that much better in a network with people, and how we are created to do life together. I think everyone has that intrinsic desire.
We're social beings.
Yeah, we're social beings. We're meant to do it together. And so, yeah, that shift happened in my mid-20s, where I just was like, hey, I need to do life with people. I need to do this. This vision needs to be bigger than just me.
That is very powerful. Yeah. I just want to pause you there, because mid-20s, height of fun for a lot of people, young men and women in their 20s, right? Yeah. Selfish, so to speak, so very much inward focused.
Sure.
And really looking more at what's in it for me. So their radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me?
I like that.
And for you to have this awareness at that age.
Yeah.
What do you liken that to?
Yeah, I think I like it to probably the environment, social environment I was in, moving around, all those things. And then being, you know, my peer influence were people that were much older than I was, caused me to maybe skip what the average, you know, young adult or teenage years would be like. I mean, looking back at it now, it probably wasn't a pleasant, kind of a starchy, obnoxious, you know, I collected suits and old records, and had just kind of maybe ahead of my time.
And old soul.
Yeah, old soul. And I guess we're made up of our influences, right? So a lot of my friends were in their, you know, 40s plus.
Wow.
So just in the church world, and then my parents being a big primary influence. So I think, you know, again, 17, 18 years old, having a full-time job, just being kind of thrown into life and in the workforce. It's like sink or swim type of thing. So it caused me to grow up really quickly. And so I think some of the development, some of the mental development happened earlier than maybe with the average person, because it almost forces you to.
Right.
So again, I think that's probably why there was an early awakening.
Yeah. Very, very powerful. Now...